Hello, welcome back or welcome to Meant to Move. My name is Vanessa. I'll be your host, and I am continuously your host on this podcast. We welcome back OD, the Movement Yoda. I think his 5th episode. This is getting very exciting. This one, I keep saying each one is my favorite, but I think I get recency bias. However, this is definitely one to give to your trainers, to give to your coaches. If you are a trainer or a coach, I would love to know what you think about this, because we are trying to challenge what we think about traditional programming. With the emergence of AI, with lots of online programming, I think, and in my experience with working with clients as well, we need to approach this differently for people. There's been a bit of a follow-on in the last few episodes. We've had John Sinclair, we've had Gary Ward. Now we're back to OD, and we're really trying to reshape what it is you think about exercise and movement. How can you bring it into your everyday? How can you make exercise a part of your life, especially if you're someone who does not love it? Fitness professionals, we are the aliens in the room. We are the people that love it just because we love it. And we are definitely the minority. So we're the ones who have to change our thinking to try to get exercise to a broader audience. And if you are someone who does not love to exercise, I would love to know what of these last 3 episodes has resonated with you, if anything. Can you give this episode to someone who doesn't exercise and see if there's something in there that they go, I've never thought about it like that before? Because I'd be so curious to know if we can change people's minds just from listening to a few things like this. So without further ado, if you know OD, you know what's coming. If you don't know OD, you're in for a treat. Here it is. If you found this episode helpful, I would love it if you could leave a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more people who are looking to transform their health and wellness journey, and I really appreciate you for your support. Hello, OD.
Hello, Ness. How you going?
I'm smiling now, and hopefully I made you smile too. And this is how we're going to start the podcast today. Everybody driving, sitting on a bus, wherever you are, just listen to that chuckle of that man, and we know that we're in a happy place right now. So thank you.
Well, as we all know, Ness, it's that, you know, we all get thrown these curveballs. We all get thrown this stuff at us and a lot of times we actually can feel it, but we ignore it. You know, the body's always whispering to us, but for some reason we tend to ignore the whisper, whether it's distraction, whether it's fear, whether it's, I just haven't got the energy. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, you're happy because you smile. You don't smile because you're happy. So
You always say something profound.
if we can bring something that puts a smile on our face, which then enables us to be happy and enables the listener to get touched in a space that maybe they haven't been touched for a while, and that may be just in a manner, Ness, where they have that freedom just to listen and not have to think or create an answer or find a solution.
I like that because I've come, as I always do, OD, with my ideas, and I want to do all these things. And there you are, as a constant reminder to park, Ness. You got to put the car in park to be safe before you move anywhere. All right. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good at that now. I probably wasn't good at that 10 years ago, Ness.
We all need that somebody to remind us, right? We all have that somebody. So it's cool. No, I like, you've put this in a really interesting frame of mind for me, because I've listened back to all of our episodes, the lymphatic episode that we did last time when gangbusters. Loved it. Everybody was like, oh, this is new. Haven't heard this before. Super interesting. And it got me thinking about, we've talked about, movement for therapy, movement therapy. We've talked about fascia. We've talked about lymph. We also talked about, measuring things. And so I feel like if you're coming along this journey with us, we're getting to the point now where it's like, how do I do? I've got some good background. I've got some really good knowledge behind me. And I want to talk today about programming, because I feel like, we talk about programming like it's this in the fitness industry. If you're not part of the fitness industry, maybe you've heard of programs, right? You understand maybe what a program is that you follow. But programming in the fitness industry is like, it's revered. Is your program this, or, what's
Well,
in the
Ness, I'm not
program?
sure I'm the right person to talk about programs too.
But this is my point. This is my point, because you always point out, we're trying to point out things in the industry that we're like, hold on a second here. We get a program that we get given for 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever, however many weeks. And I don't know about you, OD. I'm absolutely shite, like so shit at following a program. I just get so goddamn bored. So when I say programming or program to you, what does that evoke? What comes to mind for you first up?
Well, firstly, let's take it from a traditional perspective. Let's come down the way that we've all been taught. We're going to do a program that's going to involve 45 to 60 minutes. It's going to have some form of potential reconditioning, some potential stabilization work, some potential strength work, power work, and then some sort of recovery at the end of it. Now, it was interesting because I could, and I'm a person who's had a bucket load of injuries. And Ness, because you've experienced it, you've been a conditioning coach at the elite level. When it comes to reconditioning, to rehabilitating, it is the most boring as bat poo thing that you can do. But the good athletes do it to the letter because they know that if they follow it, there should be a positive outcome. And, the one thing I learnt about programming from a very early stage was that our aspiration was in 5 weeks' time or 6 weeks' time. Fantastic. But it was interesting because every time I did the rehabilitatory program by some of the best in Australia that we had available, as soon as I got back into the game, I broke down again. And that happened 2 or 3 times. And it was just like, come on, I'm doing everything. Maybe I was doing too much. Maybe emotionally I hadn't addressed what was going on, because you're playing at that level where there's a lot of fear and anxiety. You know the story. So I guess for me, when someone says programming now, and I talk about Phil Soma's programming, there's a very valid piece of research that I didn't get until later in my coaching career. But from a common sense perspective, it doesn't make sense to me to try and teach the muscles the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And the reason I'll highlight that is because it's boring. Now, from a common sense perspective, now proven through neuroscience, from a common sense perspective, people won't learn and basically take in information when they're bored. They have to be happy, they have to be joyous, they have to be engaged. So it was very early days, Ness, that I found out that my programming was based around how the client felt that day. Address the niggles that they had, then give them something that was a positive win, whether it's strength or power, and then do something that made them smile. So when they left, they wanted to come back. And when I say come back, I don't necessarily mean to me, they wanted to come back and condition themselves again. So the science I'm going to talk about is, from a neuroscience perspective, it shows that it takes about 450 repetitions to retrain a muscle. In play, it takes between 10 and 20. Now, once again, that's not me making that up. There's stuff out there now that just shows this. And it's kind of funny, right? Because, you know me, play is one of my biggest things, because going to the gym bores the crap out of me. And it's intimidating. It really is. And I'm a person who's lived in them because I had to, because of my sport, right? But it bored me because of the fact that every time I went down the traditional path of overloading tissue to get size like we were taught, I would break down. But as soon as I then started to manipulate, to challenge my body in a more multi-directional moment, so instead of just taking a shoulder press and pressing it above my head, I might take it out to the side, I might bring it to the front, I might rotate my hips and take it to the back and start to feed that shoulder, trunk, whatever it is, region, what we call intelligent motion. And guess what? Shoulder pain disappeared, strength got better, so that when I did go into a traditional shoulder press, I could actually do it safely, effectively, and I was getting heavier lifts. Now, the heavier lifts weren't what I was after, but they were the KPIs that the conditioning coaches needed, as we know, because if we don't tick our KPIs, we don't have a job. So, Ness, I guess when it all comes, I'm not bagging physios, I'm not bagging exercise scientists, I'm not bagging anyone. What I am saying is I've been in the industry for 30 years and I get the cases that most people would just scratch their head and go, what do I do? And I enjoy them because the people just want to get better. And that better might be 1%. And if I can help them get out of a chair better, if I can help them walk better, if I can help them breathe better, if I can just have a positive change of some sort, all of a sudden, the layers that they improve in is just amazing. So I'm sorry, that was a long-winded what's programming to me, but I think we've got to unpack the term. We've got to find the term. I'm not saying repetition doesn't work. I've got some great conditioning coaches, good friends of mine, highly qualified, done it, and they're amazing coaches, amazing. But if you're a person who's not an analytical brain and you're a person who potentially needs to be challenged, entertained, given freedom, then our programming will look very different to someone who loves structure and loves to know what the movement is and to feel it in a certain area.
Yeah, I don't think that was long-winded. I think that was great. Thank you. What that brought up for me was a really interesting dissonance because I learnt the science first.
Mm.
And this is where I think, we have this breakdown between the science and then the real life, because the science is done on athletes. The science is done usually, especially exercise programming science, on people who have to go in and do the same thing again and again, because you need to reduce the amount of interference, so to speak, in a study, so that people can be studied, so that you can get an answer to a question. And this is where I think that it breaks down, because like you said, I have zero emotional attachment to a program that makes me do exactly the same thing for 8 weeks in a row. I will lose my mind because I just don't move that way. Now, differentially, my partner, he loves to move that way.
Correct.
So he loves to move that way. But even then, I would say he's smart enough week in, week out to feel his body and adjust. Oh, I'm not going to do chest press with dumbbells today. I'm going to do it with a barbell because whatever, right? So even that has a slight amount of variation when you've trained and you know what's going on. It's the same exercise, just a little different. That's the bodybuilding ethos, right? Do an incline and then do a flat and then do a decline. It's the same kind of principle that you're talking about there. But I think that this is where we're working with people who don't have movement intelligence, and that's not necessarily their fault. Movement's a language that you and I speak. We've spoken it since we were children. And I was interviewed for a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and movement isn't most people's language. Movement's our language. Movement's what we do. And so we have to translate that science and go, okay, we know that X amount of repetitions or X 450 repetitions on the muscle is what's going to get change for people. But if they don't move that well, if they don't know how to manipulate the exercise based off how they feel that day, that's up to me to be able to monitor and educate them on how to do that. That doesn't mean I'm constantly changing the program. And I say that in inverted commas for those of you listening, because that's where I think that this conversation breaks down when we're talking to exercise scientists or people who really stick to the science. I'm not disagreeing with the science. I just think that we're not very good at applying it to the people who don't speak that language at all.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Ness, because even when I was conveying what a program was to me, to watch your face, the visceral change that I could see inside you, because we've all done it. I mean, I've got clients that I conditioned back in 2002, 2003, who used to still call in to my studio in 2020 and say, I'm still doing those exercises. I would cringe thinking, oh my God, what did I give you back then? But they're pain free and they're living a life and they're happy, right? And we know this, just to add a bit more layer to that, that the brain really doesn't like repetition, nor does fascial tissue. So it's interesting because when I'm conditioning someone, just as you are, I'm not thinking about the physical. I'm thinking about the emotional. I'm thinking about the mental. I'm thinking about every time I take my right hand, can I cross my body somewhere so that I can now cross-pollinate the brain, that I can now get them in a better position to breathe so I can get oxygen to their brain, so that now they can actually feel that, wow, how come I've got a calmness about me because I've got oxygen going to my brain? So it's just interesting. It's not this, it's physical, emotional, mental, even the spiritual side. Let's be perfectly honest. I'm not going to go. Spiritual to me is I treat people the way I want to be treated. Just imagine if society did that at present time. If we treated people as we would want to be treated, how much more calmness, how much more politeness, how much more patience there would be in society, right?
Respect.
Oh, wow. Let's not go there. That's a big one.
No, I think you bring up this super interesting paradox, and I can't remember if I've learnt it from you or just, I don't know, somewhere down the track.
Somewhere down the track, I reckon.
We learnt it. I don't know. Well, there's this continuum, right, of humans needing routine to a certain degree, but also need variety and novelty. And I think that this paradox is exemplified really, really well in this programming capacity, because I see people craving variety when they step into group exercise. And the reason why they step into group exercise is because 9 times out of 10, you're going to a class that's different week in and week out. And the instructor has variety and they've got different music and it's a bit of a different vibe every week. So you get that variety. But we also know if you did something like Les Mills or something, they followed that science of, we do this for 12 weeks and then we change it and we do that for 12 weeks. We might bring in other tracks and add a little bit of variety along the way. But that to me was one of the most perfect ways to introduce variety and repetition at the same time. And I think that what people don't realize when we talk about this variety and repetition, the way that you move is represented in what's happening in your life. If your life is mundane, very regimented, very routine, very same all the time, you're likely to want to crave that variety somewhere else. Maybe you do it on the weekends because you go out with your mates and you go do all these fun, crazy things. But maybe you do it in your programming because, on Monday I do Pilates, on Tuesday I do yoga, on Wednesday I do CrossFit, and on Thursday I do this, blah, blah, blah. And you just say that you like all these different things, but that's maybe your body saying that I need this stimulation because my life is very routine, it's very similar. But on the other hand, if your life is chaotic and a little bit out of control and things are happening that you don't have a lot of control over, well, perhaps the routine of doing something safe and doing something similar in the gym is actually super useful and super reassuring for you, because now you have that safety in knowing that you've got these patterns that you can come back to while everything else in your life is chaotic. And I think we really need to pay a lot more attention to this paradox that we kind of live in as humans between this variety and routine.
And
Did you teach me that?
it's kind of interesting. No, I didn't teach you that. You would have found that from a very smart person, I would suggest. Um, so it's really what you're saying in a simplistic setup is life's about stress. If our life is very low stress, very structured, we need some more stress, more challenge, more whatever in another area. But if our life's already crazy, busy, go, I love it, I enjoy it, then I want to get away from that when I go into my gym, Pilates, whatever it may be, to something that is just known. So yeah, I totally agree with it. Totally agree with it, because it's we use the word stress like it's a filthy word. It's a bit like mental health. Like there's so many things. Depression and anxiety are real emotions. But if we could just help people do fundamental things and give them what they need based on their environmental stresses, let's call that a lifestyle.
Mhm.
I feel, because I've witnessed it, I would feel that we would change a lot of people very, very effectively. And we could do it through sunlight, we could do it through breath, we could do it through movement, we could do it through getting out of the ocean, going for a walk through the park, going to a
Mm.
group class. There's so many ways that we could have a greater effect by understanding those stresses.
Yeah, and I think that, you're with me on this side of it, is that we tend to see people who've come from that chaos, that everything's kind of too much for me at the moment. And so I actually think it's much harder to find guided exercise that is slower, that is more feel based, that doesn't have to push you when you don't need it. And I think that that is what we're really trying to highlight here, is that a lot of people, we know how to push people. We know how to give them a 12-week program. And if they did it, they'd probably get great results.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's not taking into account absolutely anything else that comes into their life. And that's the challenge that needs to be met to create lasting change for people who want to immerse themselves in exercise and in have a program and be able to do things for life as well as for exercise as well.
And it's, just imagine as coaches, allied health professionals, breath instructors, whatever you want to call, whatever you come under, just imagine if we empowered people by saying, for those who don't have enough stimulation in their life, okay, do some breathing, reset the nervous system. Now I need you to go out onto the grass and just do some sprints. Build, get that heart pumping, get that lung open, or those lungs open, and feel what it's like to actually run again. And I don't care whether it's only 5 or 6 strides. I don't want you to run 150 meters. I just want you to maybe work your way through your gears and go from slow to half speed, but feel what that's like when you stop, because I can assure you, when you've been a person who's played as a child, running is one of the most exhilarating things you can do. And it's one of my go-tos. I've got an 80-year-old who comes in and he's quite round-shouldered, kyphotic. One of the first things I'll give him on the wall is a running drill. So he's leaning against the wall. He picks his leg up to hip height. He stands on one leg and he drives his opposite leg back. So he's basically just doing a reverse reach with one leg and then stands back up into that running position. But because his arms are straight against the wall and he lifts his chest, my God, when he comes away from the wall after 30 seconds, he can breathe, he's smiling, and he's taller. Now, that's just common sense, right? That's what you and I have done all our life. We've been able to do those things. That's not through reading a book. That's not through going and doing the advanced course of, whoever. That's just saying, wow, that's pretty amazing that I can rekindle an emotional time that I felt great and that the body recognizes the pattern. So you've taken the emotion, you've taken the mental, you've given the body a movement challenge, which is now the movement pattern. And you're in a situation where you think, wow, it's safe. They come away from the wall and we've got a new person in the room. How cool is that?
It's so cool. And it happens every time. I taught a charity class on the weekend, and so fun. Just like the music, and you knew my demographic, and number one, that the music sparks joy because it's nostalgic and people having a bit of a sing along, but it also gave people permission to like scream in the middle of like their workout. And we played, this is definitely a you game for sure, where I section off an area. And, there's a big group, so it's a little bit congested. That's the whole point. You've got a partner and you're not allowed to run. You're only allowed to walk, and you're only allowed to walk as fast as you can walk. And you have to chase your partner, only walking in between the congestion of everyone else trying to chase their partner. And it's just the most, it's the easiest game to play because everyone can play it. Most people can walk relatively fast. And as soon as you give adults permission to like run amok, the noise level just
Off
increases. So
smile.
funny. The
It's like
smile.
a great dentistry ad.
Yeah. But it's again, it's super simple. And then, that component of the workout came before intensity. So that was like the builder for me to bring intensity into the body, because you know what, if you start feeling happy before you're about to do something quite hard, you're in a better position to be able to do it as well. So it's just fascinating when you start to put all these pieces together how well they work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look, that's great coaching, right? That's using all of our tools in our toolbox, not just using, a strength component or a balance component or a power. It's about using all our tools and understanding that we can manipulate the group through an emotional, mental reaction.
Yeah. 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 Shout out to Shania Twain, who like everybody went nuts to. Like all right. Let's dive into perhaps a little bit of practical advice. So someone's coming, they've listened to all your episodes and they're like, okay, I've exercised a little bit. I've dabbled in and out. I know how to squat, I know how to deadlift, I know how to do a push up, just kind of the basics. If I wanted to put together a program, OD, in inverted commas, if I wanted to do something, what components do you think are essential to think about to add into this program?
I love the questions you ask because they are on the money. So the very first thing that you want to do as a person to create a program is to identify what the program is going to help you in. Right. So in other words, if I'm a person who works in the garden, I want to make sure that I look at the positions that I'm on in the garden that I may need to be able to get in and out of. So for instance, if I'm a person who, just say I'm a gardener, they're going to kneel, which I've got to go from ground to stand and stand to ground. I'm certainly going to squat, for want of a better word. They're going to squat down, but the squat will never be in a squat pattern. It will be in what we call an odd position. So you might have 1 foot turned out, 1 foot straight, 1 foot slightly forward, 1 foot back. So you'll have these odd positions. You'll start conditioning yourself. Remember what we said at the start. The brain really doesn't like repetition, and nor does fascia. So the more that we can condition the body to move differently, the better it now is at adapting under stressful loads. And stressful loads is when you're in the garden and a snake pops its head out from the rose bushes and you're not expecting it and you're kneeling on your knees and all of a sudden your sphincter valve is fairly tight, you can't breathe and you're trying to go backwards but your knees are stuck to the ground. That's what I'm conditioning people for.
I'm
So
really glad I didn't take a sip of my tea then, because it would have ended up all over my microphone.
I had this couple who were clients of mine for 13, 14, 15 years. Anyway, this beautiful lady came in, both Canadian couple. He was probably at the time 61, 2-ish, chartered accountant. She came in, she'd done 30 years on the airlines in Canada. She was the most beautiful, placid, amazing person. He was the most gruff, just, didn't speak much, just very matter of fact. Him and I finished up best mates. He was just the greatest guy, right? But the interesting thing was 3 mornings a week they would come in and see me because that's what he was. He was a regimented person. He wanted to do it. They loved it. Anyway, Alison said to me one day, she said, and this would be 10 years after they've started, and there used to be 30 stairs up and there used to be 30 stairs down from my practice. So she said, I walked out last week and I walked down the stairs and I stepped onto the street and this kid came past on a skateboard at a rapid rate of knots. And she said, I basically hopped back and landed on one leg. And she said, I turned around, looked up the stairs and said, thank you, Ian. That's conditioned me to be able to do that. Because she said that was certainly an ACL, that was a knee injury or a back injury happening, ready to go, right? And it's interesting because they're the things we've got to do. So if you're not training for your outcome, then don't train, right? So firstly, the pattern's got to look like what you're going to do. The second thing is move through the patterns with very little weight. So you might say you're going to pick up a bag of, soil which is a 20 kg bag from a garden supply. Well, get maybe a 2 kg weight and go through some odd positions of squatting down, or of going into sort of a lunge position where you step forward and maybe twist, or step to the side and maybe put it straight down. Just get lightweight and start doing those movements. And what you'll find is, because you don't ever want to load yourself to max, we always want to do sub-maximal, because we're not just training the muscle, we're training the fascial system as well, the neural system. So if we do it sub-maximal, we've got a better chance of creating sequence and strength that is going to be successful. So movement pattern, create a weight that's comfortable, that initially will feel light, then you'll start to challenge yourself, and then you get to a stage where you can say, wow, yeah, right, I might do a set where it's a little bit closer to the real weight, but then I'm going to come out. And, do that 2 or 3 times a week. Don't do it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Vary your days, because the brain likes variation. The brain likes variety. The brain likes variability. The 3 V's. So if we can do that, and so does the fascia, so if we can create that variety, what you're going to find is the strength that you'll have, the confidence that you'll have, the ability to be able to live the quality of life that you want will be through the roof. And I don't care whether you're a gymnast. I don't care whether you're a netballer. I don't care. It's the movements have got to look like the sport. And it's interesting because of the fact that if you were doing 2 to 3 sessions a week, you're going to notice some pretty significant changes. The secret is, after you've done your session, maybe it's 30 minutes. I'm not a 60-minute person when it comes to a session. If we give the body quality, 30 to 40 minutes is tops. By the time you do some priming, some preparation, and by the time you do some recovery, you might go 45. That's okay. Probably 20 minutes intensity, 25 minutes tops would be me. And it's interesting because, once again, I'm not training for bodybuilding. So I haven't got to do massive overload, repetitive overload. I'm training for life. That's what I'm training for. I want to keep pain to a minimum. I want to keep degeneration to a minimum, and I want to be able to do whatever I want to do in a confident manner. So that's my program design for me. So if that's the case, the secret really is recovery. Give yourself 48 to 72 hours to recover between each program, because if you do, you're going to see some great results.
I like it. I think the challenge for a lot of people is the confidence to take a movement that they do in real life and apply it to the gym, because this is the thing that you and I have been labeled the entire time of my entire career. Oh, you're the weird trainer. You're the person who moves weird. You're the person who crawls on the floor and does strange things. And it's like, have you seen someone play with a child on the floor? Do they say that that's weird? Like, no. But how many grandparents can get on the floor and play with their grandchildren?
Correct.
Without pain and for a sustained amount of time? I know this weird moving thing. It frustrates me to no bloody end, because humans aren't designed to move in a patterned way. And I'll use an example. I had a client, been training for years, and she fell pregnant and having a baby. And this was at a time where I was still training her at her house. So we didn't have access to a lot of heavy weights. And I said to her, we need a big sack of rice, like a big 10-kilo sack of rice. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you're going to have a sack of rice that wriggles in a baby, and you need to be able to pick the baby up and put it in the carrier, in the car, in the, I don't know, wherever from the floor, from everything. And so we literally picked up and put down this sack of rice in as many different ways that we could figure out how to pick it up and put it back down again. And that was fine for her because she was doing it at home. So there's no reason why you can't just literally get a big 10, 20 kilo sack of rice, leave it at home. And then that's how you're practicing your weird movements, in quotation commas, because you don't want to be seen doing that at the gym. That's totally fine. But I think that there is so much value to training like a real person, getting up and down off the floor, like you said. Like, it's so important.
I think the hardest part you have to contend with, as you've said, and we've seen it now for the last 25 years, is that you have magazines that are still writing about the same things they were writing about 25 years ago. They've still got exercise of the month that is still a double arm shoulder press, vertical shoulder press, or a chest press, or a squat, or a lunge, or whatever. I mean, there's 69 different foot positions for a squat. Why do we always squat the same way? Like, it's ludicrous, right? There is certainly people out there now who are saying to take the knee past the toe, which I love, but then sometimes they're going to the nth degree of doing stuff, and you think there's no need to do that. Like, you're putting people into a compromised potential now, rather than just saying, hey, let your knees drive over your toes. So therefore you're going to activate your forefoot, which means your big toe, your pelvic floor, your diaphragm, your pericardium of your heart and lung, and your tongue are all going to activate, which is your deep core line. Fantastic. So it's just interesting, right? And I've seen it a lot over the years. The people who are a little bit different sometimes just go too far on the spectrum, and it scares the hell out of people. And of course, then it makes it a real us versus them confrontation,
Yeah.
because the one thing about you and I, Ness, and about a lot of people that we've worked with and know, they would never put people in danger to hurt. We would never put someone in danger. And it's interesting because it's the extremes that people get broken in. It's the extremes. It's never, you can blow a disc picking up an A4 piece of paper, but I'll guarantee you, if you picked up an A4 piece of paper and blown the disc, your knees haven't moved. You can blow a disc sneezing. I can guarantee you, if you have, it's because you're as rigid through your neck and shoulders as you could ever be, and your hips don't move. So there's all these things that happen that we can hurt ourselves doing. Yes, I get it. But weird movement isn't about doing the movement just because it's weird. It's what we call, they're movements for life. They're odd position. Odd position is where we have to get stronger. How many footballers did you condition, Ness, that, they did an ACL and, they were stringent in the gym, they did their warm-up, they did their roller work, they did everything, but their program didn't reflect three-dimensional movement. And that meant that all of a sudden that the ACL was compromised under heavy load.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and look, I can say it from my own personal experiences when I was working in a more traditional gym and partaking in more traditional, heavier weight training program rather than my own exploration of those. I would have and you and I are both the same. We're both bendy and a little hypermobile. The stiffness that I had in my body compromised me so much that I would sublux joints, sneezing or turning too quickly. And I had like a series of ribs subluxed and my SI joint just consistently and that was the tension in my body, the muscular tension, the fascial tension being so overloaded from these similar movement patterns that because my joints have too much range of motion, I could literally shift my bones out of place. And that's wild, like wild. And that's a really common theme that I hear in bendy human populations. And that's not really well understood because we give people, again, this is your rehab program. Do some, shoulder rehab, and here's your 4 shoulder rotator cuff exercises that you do, and I'll just crack your rib back in because it goes in real easy because you're hypermobile. So it's just knock it back in and it's fine. But it hasn't really addressed any of the issue, which was for me particularly, when I do the same thing again and again, that exercise becomes the problem, quite literally becomes the problem. And I see that quite significantly represented in the bendy community.
Yeah, and that's very true. I had a lady in here 2 weeks ago, and she goes to India, she runs, retreats, and very bendy person, and to the stage where her feetness just collapsed, right? It's just like, but it's interesting because when we started talking and I said, okay, so we need to get some stiffness into your fascial tissue. So they've heard of fascia because the yoga community has, and a lot of people talk about it. But when I said stiffness, she straight away went into fear because she thought that meant rigidity, right? And I said, no. That's a very different perspective, rigidity is the enemy of movement. Stiffness allows you to stabilize and pass the force through. So it's this constant education that we've got to create for people, and hopefully these podcasts help the listener understand better. Because you know what? In all the years that I went through rehabilitatory processes, and I've got some of my best mates are physios, chiros, osteos. They're great at what they do. I consider them to be healers more than anything. And we've had this discussion, and they've said we were never taught about tissues that were bendy. No, they weren't, because they didn't look at the fascial tissue, But at least they've got the humility to be able to say that. So if someone gives you an exercise and you don't know what type of tissue you are, it's a bit like going and getting going to get an operation, not having a blood test and finding out what blood type you are in case something goes wrong. You've got to know your type.
No, it's a fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
What I would love to ask is for people who are following a program now. So just say they have an online coach, or they've been following a program and they're hearing this and they're like, okay, how do I introduce variability, variety? Where do you think is a really good starting point for someone who's just trying to do their best? How can you help them with that?
All right, so let's narrow it down, because if we spoke about programming, we would talk about a traditional person, a progressive person who's more functional, wild, crazy, and there's a hybrid in between, right? Now, I would suggest you and I live to the progressive hybrid side, but let's just say that you have a typical person who is a analytical brain, and they want to do traditional. They love the known exercise. They love the sets and reps, that sort of stuff. My first question is, what makes you uncomfortable if you step outside your program that you know now? What would make you uncomfortable? Now, the majority of people will say, well, I don't feel comfortable pushing a shoulder press out to the side, or I don't feel comfortable doing a step with a bicep curl. So what I would say is, all right, let's do something really funky then. Really funky. Instead of doing 3 sets of 15, let's do a 15, a 6, and a 10. What? So I'm going to play with them in their mind where they can still control the movement, but I'm going to change the numbers, because that's a big enough change for them to be able to cope. So you might, instead of having to say 15, 15, 15, which is 45 reps, you might say, okay, I want you to do 15, and then I want you to do 8, 23 reps, and then I want you to do 10, there's 33 reps, and then I want you to finish off with 12. So you might do 4 sets instead of 3 sets. Change the numbers up. Don't change the exercise at the minute. Just change, because all I'm trying to do, Ness, me as a coach, is I want to challenge them to be able to cope with change, but the change has to be small when they're a very traditional person.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that that's a really nice, simple way to look at it as well, because my brain initially goes to, it's funny where your brain goes. It's like if you're chest pressing with, your palms forward, can you turn your palm or something like that? And playing with slightly different grips or hand positions, I think is a super useful way to start. But I really love the numbers game, because at the end of the day, if you are on traditional training, if you're hitting the repetitions to achieve a certain result, because we know that this is what it's a formula for a reason. That's a really cool way to have a bit of a play with it. And I think that also allows people on the days where they're not feeling so crash hot, are like, oh yeah, I'm allowed to manipulate the numbers. Okay, so maybe I'll just do a set of 8, and then a set of 6, and then another set of 6, and maybe then I've got a 7, and play with it in that way, because now you're actually stressing your body to its capability for the day while still following the program.
And the biggest thing I've learned over the years, Ness, is that when you take someone who's truly a traditional, passionate trainer, as soon as you take their form and change their direction or their distance or their height of their push or whatever, they stop breathing. And of course, when they stop breathing, they become rigid. And that's when they damage themselves. So it's a matter of really just focusing on something small first. And, depending upon how long they've been training, I'm sure they've alternated and they've done simultaneous movement. They've done all the basic stuff that we teach. And if they've done that, they're halfway there to being a hybrid trainer, because you can start to do all sorts of little weird things from a, you might do a traditional squat with a deadlift. So, Olympic bar, a couple of plates either end. And you might just simply say, all right, I want you to take your right foot forward 20 mil, 3/4 of an inch, and do the same exercise. Right? So as you say, same as you said with the wrists, with the hands, with the arms, we're just changing direction. We're changing how far we push it, whatever it may be. We're manipulating that, which is going to make a big difference. But anything that's too big, too hard, people will stiffen, people will become rigid, people won't breathe because they go into that fear of change. We just want to make sure that if I do anything, probably the biggest rule I live by, if I change one thing, I change everything. So if my foot is half an inch narrower in stance, I change everything. If it's a half an inch wider, I change everything. If it's half an inch forward, I change it. So change one thing, change everything. Change your grip, put more weight on one end than you do on the other. Not much, just a little bit. Same squat pattern, do a traditional squat pattern, but maybe put 25 on one end and maybe put 22 on the other, and do it. Because trust me, the brain, the body is going to go, what the?
Very cool. I love those suggestions. What I will caveat that by saying is, if you're someone who is doing 1 to 5 RMs, don't change things. Probably do it sub-maximally.
Well, sub-maximally. Thank you, Nick.
Just a little note at the end of that one.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny because we're just talking as it is, and I guess I used the word sub-maximal before, but I should have highlighted that then. So thank you for saving my butt.
Got your back. All right, you got mine, I got yours. This is how we do it. I love this concept of, people that's where that's where the people who are going to be science be like, but you can't change that if you're lifting heavy. And you're like, yeah, don't change that if you're lifting really heavy. You need to be in your established pattern. You need to go where you feel the most safe. But we're not talking about that. And honestly, I don't know how many regular people, I'm talking about the 70% who have never stepped in gyms. How do we get them into the gym? I'm sorry, it's not with 5RM programming. No way. It's not with 5RM programming, because it's there.
You know what's interesting? And I'm going to say this because, once again, you can never train an athlete for the event with the same amount of force that they're going to go through. You never can. It's impossible, because if you do, you've just ruined them for the event, right? If I train a horse for a race, you never want them at their top speed like they would in an event, because once they do that event, they've blown fuses. You've got to bring them back now and repair them, recover them, reset them, right? So it's interesting, because if we look at our programming from a 1 to 5, and I don't want to get in and upset anyone, but I'm just saying, I would be seriously looking at probably still sub-maximal lifting, because you're going to build hypertrophy, no doubt. You're going to build cardiac strength, cardiac fitness, no doubt. More importantly, you're going to leave some petrol in the tank, so you're going to recover better, which means you're going to perform better, because you'll find 20% more in the event. Just my 20 cents.
I think that was worth more than 20 cents. Just saying. No, that's great. I think that is a really excellent place to leave that, because I feel like we could just keep going all afternoon otherwise.
It's a person who's doing the program, understanding where they are, where their emotions are. Are they sleeping? Are they eating? Are they hydrating? What's their mood like? All that stuff.
Yes, it is all of that stuff. Excellent. That is the last quote I will leave you with. It is all of that stuff. Remember it. It's in the podcasts. Go back and listen to them.
The people stuff is far more important than the science stuff. Just remember that.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Wise words, OD. Thank you again. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I'll see you again soon.
Pleasure, Ness. Looking forward to it. Listeners, I hope you're enjoying this. If there's any questions, please write in. Please ask, because we're more than happy to pass our experience on. Doesn't mean we'll have the answers, but we will certainly give you some solutions.